so osnem be keote ena sosne embi wama eso صوتي امو نهيت ني ابكي انت بنيوتك نار شرف سبابا أفاتا ودرس بنيوتني بسكوبوس أفا كيرلس نم بنيو بسكوبوس أفا با لي شوي ريهمو أتنا نمبيكو
Soteos betir bandokator managatrias and sonimas. Praise and not intending on show them in a mean for no help and hardship tribulations, but you make us worthy to pray with all thanksgiving. Yeah, Ben Lazif Samoa. God bless us.
We are so happy today and blessed today for your coming, His Grace Bishop Cyril, the General Bishop of Los Angeles. Today we're teaching about Saint Cyril, this Kyrollis, الكبير, the Great, about his life and writers. Thank you, Sayyidina, again, and we are here to discipline for you.
It's working. Thank you, Your Grace, for the kind invitation, and Abuna Thanasius and all of you. I apologize for first the language, and secondly for the timing. When I was a deacon, I was always early, and when I was a priest, I was always on time, and now it seems we're always late. And as Ambasarapian says, if you forget Los Angeles, what it means, you just say late always. So all of us usually coming for the time. So the subject we have is difficult one, and I will try to simplify as much as possible. The writings by himself of Saint Cyril are complicated in any language, Greek, English, Arabic, and so I will try to simplify, because based on this is the great foundation for the faith and for the church, not just the Coptic church, but the church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and God, amen. May the Lord bestow upon us His grace and His blessing, now and ever, into the ages of all ages, amen. We'll speak about 4 points of our subject tonight. The life and the works, and then speak about the main subject, which is the Christology, and then see what is the legacy of Saint Cyril. Mainly the source that we have for the life of Saint Cyril is from 3 regions: the history of the patriarchs, Saint Isidore of Pelusium, and John of Nicaea. Even with all of the other sources that we have, we don't know much of the details of his life. We know the time roughly of his birth, and the time which he was serving with his uncle, Ambatophilos, and the time of his papacy. The time of his patriarchate was blessed until the end, and as long as he is alive, there was one church. In the modern times, there were many accusations against Saint Cyril, based on one book which is more fiction than history. So they blame him for murder, for bribing, and from expelling the Jews from Alexandria. In the last 30 years, all of these accusations, the scholars finally able to give very good defense. We'll speak in terms of his works. There is so much that he wrote that they were saying that all of the people of Alexandria were able to copy and to translate, according to the patriarchs, was barely enough to keep up with his ability for writing. And from the level of his writing, still, after many years, not all of his works are translated. And maybe to the great benefit, one of the few fathers, that most of his, or many of his, more of his works are in Arabic than in English. But still, we have maybe 30 or 40% still is not translated. In his early years, before 428, which is the beginning of the Nestorian controversy, he was focusing on his commentary on the whole Bible. And they say this was the tradition of the Patriarch of Alexandria. If it was not for Nestorius, he would have certainly finished the whole Bible commentary. Even then, he is one of the few patriarchs of Alexandria to have complete commentary for many of the great books of the Bible, especially on the Pentateuch and on the Gospel of John. In addition, we have many of his letters, over 100 letters that are to different monks and priests and bishops, and 31 of the festal letters. 428 to 444, almost all of his work is for against the heresy of Nestorius. I think we can speak about now Christology. In terms of every word that is used in any formula, Christological, has a big debate. Even until the 7th century in Rome, of many councils to try to explain the language that was used 300-400 years earlier. So from the time the language was being developed, the terminology for the Trinity in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, it takes or depended on the explanation that was given by the fathers. So to take the language without the explanation can be very confusing. I will explain some of the words, but it will be still confusing.
فأنا هشرح.
We come to the explanation of Saint Cyril, it's very clear. The first three words which are used to relate to the understanding of the Holy Trinity. Ousia, which is the essence or being of God, which usually refers to the divine. The word that is similar to it is physis or nature, which is speaking about concrete reality or existence. Hypostasis, which is the most concrete of the terms, so if you go from general to specific, the most specific, which is the hypostasis. People confuse between physis and hypostasis. That's why we have the question about the Chalcedon. For the most, probably one of the most important words used in the Nestorian controversy is the word for union or enosis. Even if many fathers use other words after the controversy, this is the only word to be used to explain the incarnation. Nestorius uses, as you see, maybe a list of 7, 8 other terms to speak about the incarnation. Conjunction, which is speaking about a union, but it's not full true union. So usually we did a conjunction where you have one part that is united, but the rest which is separate. Assumption is taking something, but does not necessarily belong to you. Or participation is something that you are related to, but again is not yours. Inhabitation or entering is as if we are living in a place. Again, the same thing, but it's not part of us. We'll go to explain that one of the 12 anathema that Saint Cyril wrote after, related to the Council of Ephesus, which is emphasizing the point of true union. So while before Ephesus there was nothing prohibiting other languages, this anathema is very clear that we must use this term. After we see the word enosis or union, the next most important, which is union according to hypostasis. Nestorius could use the word union, but speak of a prosopic union, union according to prosopon. So hypostasis, which is saying that the union takes place according to the hypostasis of the second divine person. So as he says here, we can compare that whenever we speak about hypostatic union, it's to emphasize that there's one hypostasis. When Nestorius used the term union, that he speaks about a union between two, which is that of the Logos and Jesus. And if he says that there is not two persons, not two prosopon. Explanation, as you see here, I don't know if you have the writings of Nestorius, the explanation is very clear that he's speaking about two. Do you have in Arabic the Nestorius?
We have it in one iPad, but we will distribute it later.
Okay. So this is the explanation for Nestorius, and we have the parallel speaking for Saint Cyril. And this is clear in his second and third letter to him. The third difficult word, which is the mia. In English, there's no way to distinguish between mia and mono. But in the Greek, mia means that one, but it can be composed of more than one element. So the mia thesis can also be translated as one composite nature. In terms of physis, there's also an abstract understanding and a specific understanding. John of Damascus in the 7th century, it applies only to general categories. Saint Athanasius and Saint Cyril usually if you have feces, there's no feces without hypostasis. They only use feces to relate to the human nature when, but only in thought alone. I'll explain later, but this does not mean he denies anything of the humanity. But in this idea, if there's two natures, then they're assumed to have two hypostases.
بس
You say two natures, you must explain that this distinction. For Saint Severus, he makes nature is very similar to hypostasis. If you say two natures, it means two hypostases, it means two prosopa.
فلو
This is why there's a big misunderstanding or argument that takes place after Chalcedon. Whether you say one nature or two nature, you have to, there's a lot of the terminology that comes outside. This is the boundaries of you can say the lines of a box that defines what we are talking about. We can say one nature in an orthodox way, one nature in a heretical way, two nature in an orthodox way, and two nature in a heretical way.
يعني ممكن
The difference are these boundaries that will be able to explain what you mean by one nature or two nature. There's had a flexibility of language, thought, and in understanding, there is limits that are in. One of the most important, which is to say that he is of or from two natures. And in the Greek, ekdiophysin,
وبالجريك
or this explanation, which everyone agreed on, including in the Council of Chalcedon.
والشرط
So he is saying that the unity is coming from, we understand that he is one hypostasis, which comes from or of two natures. And when St. Cyril, in his famous letter to Successus, when he speaks about the Miaphysis, only after he says that it took place from two natures. Why he says after the union, we cannot divide them from each other.
عشان
And this was, I would say, as important as saying Miaphysis. And Nestorius speaks about a union in two natures. And this gives the understanding that there's a continuation of the two without full and true union. The two are continuing without a full union. So in this quote, he says, the natures subsist in their prosopa and in their own natures and in the prosopon of the union. So in this one sentence, 3 times he emphasized in the prosopa, in the natures, and of the union.
ففي الجملة
Why even for probably what Eutychus, Eutychus was condemned because he didn't accept the in two natures.
وهو
When they came to report to the emperor, changed the minutes to say that he wouldn't say of two natures. So this because they were afraid that if this was the reason why they condemned Eutychus, that the emperor would not accept their counsel. But this is a long story that continues even after the Council of Chalcedon.
بس دي قصة
The formulary of union, which is the reconciliation between Saint Cyril and John of Antioch, the letter of reconciliation between Saint Cyril and John of Antioch,
في الجواب
that it's very clear they speak of a union of two natures.
واضح
Even though Nestorius was saying in two natures, that the one way for them to reconcile, they did not use this word in two natures. This statement took 2 years for them to establish. But after a short time, after the departure of Saint Cyril, they again insist on the in two natures. Just like the homoousios was debated between one letter in Greek,
وزي ما كان سنة واحدة
the same thing between Saint Cyril and between the two churches dividing over one letter, but this time it's between N and Ek. The Coptic doesn't come, but this is an explanation for the Theotokeia that we say on Sunday. it describes almost every day in the Theotokia, we will have an explanation of something from the relationship with
والثيوتوكية دي
and we say 1 out of 2. واحد minute. So the same thing which is coming from the Council of Ephesus and later after Chalcedon. In the one Theotokia, you can see all of the description that we said is important. It's in few stichon. So we'll leave for you. There's Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, especially on this point.
أنا سبها
And many of the Theotokayat were take a summary of what's in the writings of Saint Cyril and Saint Severus and some of the other fathers. We'll move now to the Miaphysis formula. There are people who study this for many, many years, but I will give a summary. The first question, which they always say that Saint Cyril used a letter by Saint Athanasius called to Jovian, the emperor. And they say that the Miaphysis from this letter was not from Saint Athanasius, but from Apollinarius. Started by the 6th century. Some of the people were saying this. But there's another group of scholars that prove that it's authentic Saint Athanasius. And even though right now the scholars are not 100% in agreement, but it seems that Saint Cyril was the one who possessed the most authentic collection of Saint Athanasius in the whole world. He would oftentimes write to other people to tell them that they have incorrect letters of Saint Athanasius or elsewhere, because there were false ones that were circulating even from different fathers. In either case, it's very clear that Saint Cyril used the Miaphysis and insisted on it during his whole life. So the problem in Chalcedon is not using the Miaphysis, is using other formulas that came from Leo or other places without complete explanation. In the writings of Saint Cyril, he uses in 3 different ways the Miaphysis. Way, which is the famous one that we read in the letter of Successus, which is the one incarnate nature of God the Logos. Another one, which is one nature of God the incarnate Logos. And there is occasion also where he speaks about the Mia hypostasis, the one incarnate hypostasis of the Logos. If this last one, everyone, as far as I know, agrees on. And even when there's the debate against Saint Severus, even John of Damascus could accept the Mia hypostasis. We can move to the 2 natures. The second phrase or the boundary that we should understand is the in contemplation alone, that the 2 natures, we understand them theoretically. Why? It doesn't mean that we deny the humanity and divinity of the Lord. Say that before the union, we only can theorize about the human nature because it didn't exist before the incarnation. As Nestorius believed that there is a body that exists already, and that the incarnation, if we take the water, is going to fill the existing body, like this. So if you pour water into a cup, the same thing. The cup is existing, and the water is filling the cup. This is the understanding of Nestorius. But for Saint Cyril, there is no cup before the union. There's no time of separation. Every time he says 2 natures is in thought alone. Let's see. I gave if you can go back to the letter of Successus, which has this very, very clear. He always used the example of the soul and the body. He says the soul has a nature and the body has a nature. God doesn't create a body and then put a soul when he's creating us. For Saint Cyril, he's saying the Lord took flesh and made it one with him. So if I speak of the human nature before the incarnation,
فلو
only speak theoretically,
بتحدث
because it has to have the existence in the hypostasis of the Son. Or else it would have its own existence, or own hypostasis, or own prosopon. That's why even in the Christological agreement, we emphasize this point to say that it must be two natures in contemplation alone. And some of the Eastern, after Chalcedon, were able to understand this, but maybe 100 years later. After Ephesus, after the letter of reconciliation of 433, the problem is that they were focusing only on this and forgetting the other letters and writings of Saint Cyril. So the ones who went back to take all of the writings of Saint Cyril, they called the whole Cyril, that they would understand exactly what happens in Ephesus, and Chalcedon could have been solved. When we came for the ecumenical movement, the reading of all of Saint Cyril were able to help us to come together. And unfortunately, in Chalcedon, there were some people only reading part of Saint Cyril and not the other. Everyone is saying that we are following Saint Cyril. The best way for us to explain that what we are saying is to bring from his writings.
for you, please.
Okay, this way we'll go faster. Okay. So even in the 6th century, when Emperor Justinian is trying to unite the churches, that he has to speak about the theoria. So this is a very hard word to translate even in English. It's very hard. So that's why when I put it here, I didn't translate.
حتى عشان كده لما
Okay, we can move to the next one. Sure. Okay.